I've been working on a long series for Swimming World magazine. I also have a mobility product, and the themes of this is that general static stretching programs isn't appropriate for the elite athletes, but even all the way down to the general exerciser. It could just be facilitating overall some impairments in performance, but also and more likely a waste of time. Okay, we all have busy lives, especially athletes, or even general exercisers that have kids, work, other activities to fill their time with. And even though static stretching feels good, and that's often reported as one reason why people do it, if it's not benefiting anything, what's the point? Okay, is it just a waste of time? And I know a lot of people think from these articles that I'm not a fan or never use static stretching, and that's not the case. It's just providing individualized stretching programs is how we're going to get most bang for our buck, not waste our time, get the benefits of stretching, which has been shown to improve range of motion, and also help decrease some sympathetic or the fight or flight nervous system. And those are really the benefits that we want to achieve, but in an individualized way, not just giving everyone all the tools, but not teaching them why you're going to use it or showing them how to use it. Okay? So one area we're going to talk about stretching today are the hip flexors. All right? We have two groups or two categories of hip flexors, our long hip flexors and our short hip flexors. The short hip flexors include our psoas muscle, which attaches to all 5 lumbar vertebrae on each side, as well as the intervertebral disc. Then it meets up with the other short hip flexor, the iliacus, coming here from our iliac crest, connecting, coming down right to the inside of the thigh. Our long hip flexor is our rectus femoris. This is one of our quadricep muscles, and this one actually runs all the way from about the knee, entering into the quadriceps tendon, and then coming all the way up, once again crossing the hip joint. There's a misconception that all quadricep muscles cross the hip joint, but the rectus femoris is the only one. The other 4 quadricep muscles are really just located in the thigh region, and a lot of the stretching you see people doing doesn't target them at all. Okay? So why people have tight hip flexors is pretty obvious in our society nowadays. If I'm over here working on my desk, rounded here, my hips are flexed, my spine's flexed, my hip flexors are tight. Okay? Over time, these muscles just get this adaptive shortening, and they start to get shorter and shorter and shorter, and then when we kind of get up, we try and move around, we're leaning back, we're doing sporting activities that require hip extension. We may not get all that hip extension that we need. That's when this specific individualized static stretching is needed. So if you have a butterfly who can't get enough hip extension to drive their dolphin kick, or we're working with an athlete that's performing maybe a vertical jump here, going up for a layup or a dunk, and they're not getting this hip extension, they're not going to be able to create enough power. Or you're working with someone who needs to sprint. Okay, sprinting requires a lot of hip extension, maybe 20, 30 degrees of our legs come back here, but if we're only in this range here, we're not creating much power. Okay, we think about the athletes that use a lot of hip extension. Now I was mentioning sprinters, they got strong, large glutes. They activate the glutes through hip extension. Okay, and if we're stuck in this position, this fixed position here, we're not going to be able to get in that range. Okay, every activity is very specific. If you have hip extension and mobile hip flexors, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to use it. That's why motor control, motor programming in your sport is key. However, if you don't even have it to begin with, there's no chance you're going to be using it in your sport. So you want to provide the athlete or the individual the tools for the task, and then teach them how to use the tools in the task. Okay, and this stretching here, static stretching that we're going to be doing here to get more hip extension is giving them the tools. Just because they have the tools doesn't mean they're going to use it though. That's where the coaching, elite motor programming, the neural training really is a huge component. Okay, but let's get into how to give them the tools of hip extension. Okay, there's other ways to get more hip extension, foam rolling, myofascial releases, self-myofascial releases, but static stretching is something that someone can do over time. It can help prevent that creep or that adaptive shortening over the time. So I suggest when we're stretching the long hip flexors here to get into this half kneeling position, holding onto a bench or something for support, then what they're going to do is tighten their abdominals, tilting their pelvis back, posteriorly tilting it back, getting a longer line here for the hip flexors. Also tightening the glute on that backside, getting hip extension, finding this big stretch right in the muscle belly. Okay, hold on for support. Stretching should be relaxing and decreasing that sympathetic tone of the muscles and nervous system. Okay, I often see people, stretching all the way out here. That can stretch out the capsule, especially create some instability in the front of the hip. That's something we don't want to create. When someone has instability or is stretching out the capsule excessively, they're going to have impaired control or impaired joint awareness and proprioception. When you have decreased proprioception, you're unable to really have proper motor skills or learn motor skills that need to be fine-tuned in your sport. Okay, with your elite Olympic level athletes, they have great motor control. They can precisely move their joints and understand joint awareness. We don't want to decrease the capacity for any athlete when it comes to proprioception or joint awareness. So that's why we're not trying to really get into this abuse of stretching that huge capsular out in the front. Okay. So once again, just holding here for this form of static stretching, I usually suggest 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, that's when you're going to get some adaptive changes here. You don't need to be doing this day in, day out, over and over and over. Okay. Another mechanism that you can use to help get a little bit more of a stretch is trying to get some mobilization in the joint. Okay. So what you can do here is get one of these heavy bands, place it real high up on the hip, and what that's going to do is cause or result in a little distractive force of the hip. I actually got this one from Kelly Starr over at San Francisco CrossFit. He started to implement this one, and what it can do is actually just provide a little distraction of the femur inside the pelvis or acetabulum, and what that can do is just get a little unwinding of the hip joint. Okay, like I said, we don't want to stretch the capsule out excessively. However, getting a little traction in there can just help provide a little bit more range of motion, especially if we're stiff, tight, already having issues. So once you're in this position, you're doing the exact same thing. Just make sure you're really holding on to something, and you can really, get out there as far as you can. If I'm not holding on this bench, I'm about to fly back. So make sure you're holding on to something. Abs tight, glute tight, feeling that stretch, getting that distraction force as well. Okay, if you're using this heavy band, like I said, make sure you're holding on to something. But once again, 30 seconds to a minute, all you need there. Make sure you're testing this before and afterwards, maybe with a lean back test, so you want to make sure what you're doing is effective. Okay, so this is our core vid of the day.